we have a special guest, and she's sitting in a beautiful beach town, seaside town of Nosara in Costa Rica, and her name is Stacie Brown. She grew up in the Midwest in the U.S. She has held a number of impressive roles in organizations, and she'll tell us all about that. And she was very successful on the go-to-market side. She rapidly became a go-to-market leader, and was very involved. And then at some point in her life, she kind of had an epiphany, and she, on a whim, and not unusual for the characters that we seem to attract to this podcast, she followed her inkling. And I'm sure we're about to hear some of the wonderful layers and some of the things that happened. So Stacie, so good to see you. You're looking radiant as ever, and would love to hear your story. How did you get to where you are right now?
Well, thank you for that amazing intro. And I'm honored to be here and share a little bit of myself with each of you and our listeners. I think where I would like to start is you mentioned like a quick, rapid, and somewhat dramatic way that I landed in Costa Rica. And while on the surface, I think that is true. And the outward, looking in, I always say like the 9-week leap got me here. And I will share that. But when I really dive into what got me here, I think we go all the way back to such a young version of Stacie, right? Sometimes we don't know how we will arrive, but when we arrive and look back in reflection to what got us here, you start to piece the puzzle together and realize like all of this has happened. Each piece has created that, kind of that mapping, if you will, that gets you where you're at. So yes, I was a former corporate gal. I had a really successful career path in a major Fortune 100 company, climbed that corporate ladder, had the job promotions, and I really built a life I was proud of. It afforded me the travels, it afforded me the luxury car, the condo overlooking Lake Michigan in Chicago. But there was always something that was just off. And as I began to dive into what that was, I really went back to my youth. And from a very young age, I always had an innate knowing of myself and emotions and always tuned into that. And it wasn't taught to me. It was just there. In fact, so much so that it often frightened my mother. Like she didn't know what to do with this like high energy, really dominating personality. I'm a Leo, so like I came out blazing, but I was also so in tune with those around me and emotions and feeling, and I could express it. And so my mom didn't always know what to do with that. And so as I entered my corporate life, that was what was showing up as that offness. Like I could connect, I could build amazing business opportunities and achieve success, but I never felt lit up in the internal self. And I worked in, a very, being in a Fortune 100, it's a male dominated space. At that time, it was definitely a difference in where I was in my age and where most of the clients I called upon were. And I had great experiences in that, but I never felt like I could truly authentically be my full self because it was always about like, this is the corporate way, this is the box, these are the succinct steps you continue to achieve. And so I personally felt there had to be a better way. And so in that journey of self-discovery and kind of going back to the aspects of my younger version where I always dove into self-help. I was never afraid of therapy. I love like all the alternative ways in which people showed up in this world. I chose to hire a coach and I didn't really necessarily know what that would look like. And I met a wonderful woman who was recommended to me. And I said, I know I don't want to lose like the business, Stacie, and all that knowledge, but I have to leverage it in a way that is authentic to who I am. And I truly believe, like, if we give leaders, business owners, people the opportunity to bring their full selves into the equation, we're going to see so much more performance, so much more outcomes, and so much more connection with one another. And so I went on this coaching journey. And, at that time, I had like this artificial number in my head of like, I have to be here before I can make a change. And through that program, that time shared, it's probably like week 3, I was like, no, shut the noise down. Like, your intuition, your knowing is saying it is time to leave corporate America. And so I put in my notice, and I was so confident in that. Like, I had fear, but I had confidence that that was there to serve me and I would be okay. And yeah, so once I left corporate behind, found myself in a great opportunity to work within the startup community of Chicago. And so specifically working with organizations that were looking to scale above their first 10 million. And it was working directly with the founders. And that work really began with the connection to purpose and your why, and really helping them shape their mission, vision, and values of the organization so that all decisions that they were making were leading from that place of purpose. And while that was very aligned in terms of the actual work I was doing and the quality of relationships that I was building, I still felt like that offness in my body. I'm very like, our bodies tell us exactly what we need to know. And it's no surprise that coach that I worked with was a somatic coach. For many years, that's how I operated. And she, to me, was the first person that really helped me put language around it. And since then, I've dove a lot into that work and really understand the connection of our body and how it supports our knowing. But I couldn't ignore it. And so I was ready for a change. She was hosting a retreat in Costa Rica. I'd been to Costa Rica, but I'd never been to Nosara. And I was like, if not now, when? Like, you've always wanted to live international. You love the ocean. You love nature. You're really tired of city living. Go for 1 year. What's the worst that's going to happen? And my only commitment to it was 1 year, no matter what, in the country. I could move about if I wanted. And so I called my real estate agent, sold my condo, and 9 weeks later, I was in a town I'd never been to, Nosara, Costa Rica. And even worse roads than what you came on, Mark, because there was not a single concrete. I was in the tiniest little Suzuki car. I mean, I read that it was a dirt road, but in my head, I'm like, oh, it's like a dirt road to your house. That's fine. It's not going to be like dirt roads everywhere and big speed bump or, potholes and all. And I was in one of those little Suzukis that you could literally lay down and be longer than, and I'm only 5'4", and 2 suitcases, my dog, and I was like, what did I just do? Like, he was like, what am I thinking? And it just quickly made me like open up in a very new way. 6 years later, I'm still here. I never left Nosara. And, when you say like this radical dramatic entrance, and I go back to what I said earlier, and that is, it didn't begin with calling the real estate agent. It began when I traced my life back to a very young age where I was always willing to like vocalize and stand for what I wanted for myself. And obviously in a respectful way to others, never like bulldozing or things like that. But I can look back to such young moments where I just would declare things, and that is what I believed to be true, and therefore it would happen. And so it was really how I lived my life. And my sister often says this because my mom had a hard time with this. I mean, I don't know if they had a harder time with me quitting like a healthy 6-figure salary out of corporate America as like very blue collar individuals. I was the first to go to college. So for them, that was already crazy. And then they're like, are you going through a midlife crisis? Going to Costa Rica? What are you thinking? And my sister was like, Mom, if you know your daughter, there's nothing that's made more sense. Like, think back to all these moments of her life. And it was just such a pivotal moment for my sister and I, too, because we've had an interesting journey. And I was like, wow, she really does get me. And that just meant so much. And she could see it. And I was like, it's so true. These youth moments, these childhood moments shape us so drastically. And it's what we do with it. And for me, I just find joy and like honoring that piece of self and how I support others to do that. And yeah, Costa Rica, here I am.
Sure.
I love there's so many threads that I want to pull on in the story that you've just told. I kind of want to start closer to the end, and then would love to hear more as we go back through it. But when you were talking about like whether it's your mom or like, and the leaving the 6-figure job and all that, because you mentioned that you had this. It sounded like almost a timeline in your mind. When I get to here, then I'll give myself permission to do it. And so I'm just curious to like, what was there some things that you had to let go of in yourself to kind of make the leap? Because I'm sure as I listen, and I imagine anyone listening, it's like, wow, was it that simple? Like, what were the things that you had to go? Were there any things that you look back on and go, this was the thing I had to let go of, whether it was an attachment or something, in order to make, I love the 9-week leap into this magical Costa Rican life you're living now?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And, for me, I very much operated in life. I don't necessarily know that when I m- made the leap fully, probably first from corporate, that this was as clear to me as it is today. But I grew up in a really difficult environment. Like, our family struggled a lot. We definitely came from a place of poverty. My mom had a lot of dysfunction growing up, which carried into our own childhood dysfunction. I was raised in a very small town in northern Michigan. I had an absentee alcoholic father, and my mom was a single mom working multiple jobs. We, had this life that was very difficult. And, eventually she remarried a third time to who is my adopted father. And there was a series of abuse that occurred throughout my childhood from that person. And during that time, I always had this belief system of like bad things happen and we have a choice in how we show up and respond. And it also taught me a lot around like this interesting intersection of like the diversity of life and kind of where like good things can happen and bad things can happen and they can coexist. And so at that time for me, I always felt like if I took a certain path of success and whatever, like for me, that success at that time was defined because of external factors. It wasn't fully defined by myself. It was more about like, if I do this, it's the path of should, could, would, then these difficult life things would not have the same meaning and context. Through my own healing journey, I realized like the path of perfectionism was my response to a lot of deep rooted trauma. And so I had to be really willing to go within and really get to the root of what was leading me down like this high achievement path and really answer for myself like what parts of me show up there and is that really what's serving me and how do I release that today to more authentically live on my own path of purpose, which doesn't mean I'm not going to be a high achiever or perform at a high level. It simply means the way in which I want that success to come is defined very differently. And so, really releasing also a lot of like the external noise and chatter, right? Like, people will not fully understand if it's a path they would not be willing to take. And so you have to also be willing to really block a lot of that noise out so that you are truly tuning into self. And I think that's not always easy when you're on a very like structured corporate path because that's what they're telling you you're supposed to be doing. Like you're supposed to take the career steps and keep moving and achieving and financial. But success to me isn't defined any longer by finance. It was at one point because I came from poverty. I mean, I worked so hard. I bought my parents' house, their car, everything. I mean, like this was the man that abused me. And I thought, like, if I'm good enough and achieve enough, I will do this. And therefore, it's all better. When I let that go and said, I get to honor what I define success as, and while it's mine to own, I no longer have to owe somebody else. I never did, but I didn't understand that until I did the healing work to release it, to say, like, no, actually, honoring myself is firm boundaries, respect to that situation not serving me. Like, it served a purpose because it taught me a lot, but I had to really let go, like, the people pleasing as well. Like, I was on like this path of perfection, pleasing others, and like, then I'm good enough. Well, I'm already good enough. And now I can redefine success and honor it in the path that truly lights my soul up, not because I'm serving somebody else. And then wasn't that it was inauthentic, it just wasn't serving me fully. It actually created more stress and trauma, carrying that kind of responsibility for the family dynamic that was present.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, thank you for being as vulnerable as you have been, and pointing to the things that you have. But I think for the listener to have this very powerful message of what happens when you settle back into the self, when you realize that the external factors don't define you. You are not the identity that you've accumulated through your trauma or through your corporate career or through what your friends have said or your teachers have said. That those are all things that we accumulate, and we articulate. But and I love it when you said in your opening piece around, you always had this innate sense of self, and for you to be able to fall back into that and redefine the creation of your experience on your terms, and have this remarkable ability to look at some traumatic events, all events, but some of the traumatic events, and make peace with them and say, those happened, and this is what I saw, this is what I learned, or this is what they taught me. And I think I've said this before, but one of our guests likened it to building a library, and you can have a traumatic event happen, and you can see that as you actually come to see it as a blessing, as odd as that may sound. And it then lives in your library, and at any point you can pull that book off the shelf, open it up, and you can empathize with the human being who might be going through the same thing, because you've had that experience. I do want to talk about the car in the river, because for me, that was a moment when you told me that story. That for me seemed like a key moment where you consciously kind of went from quite a dark place to a very light place, and you saw something quite special in that moment. And I wonder if you could walk us through that.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties back, right? Like, if anyone, I think all of us experience pain, suffering, traumas in very different ways. And for me, I'd been on such a long healing journey that when I arrived in Costa Rica, there's a saying here, like, Nosara will show you exactly what you need to be shown. And I think that's because we live in nature, we live at the ocean, we sit in one of 5 blue zones in the world. So there is this interesting energy here. And so by the time I reached the point of being in Nosara, a lot of that childhood stuff, I had done the work, I gave the forgiveness, like, life was good, right? And so I came here at the time of what I thought was like healed. I think the thing about healing, though, is life will always show you what you still need some attention around, right? And so to kind of get to the car incident, it's sharing a little bit about Costa Rica and my time here. I moved here and I met an amazing person here, fell in love. He has a beautiful daughter that I'm so blessed to raise really as my own. Her mother is very supportive and loving of that relationship. So I feel super honored. My motherhood journey was very different. It was, lots of loss, fertility issues. And so I believe like God put me in this place for a purpose. And I am so honored the way like motherhood has shown up for me. And that really created a deeper connection in that relationship. And unfortunately, my husband's journey, he grew up here in Nosara. It's his full story to share. But what I will say is it was riddled with struggles of addiction. And that journey together had that in it. And anyone who's listening, who's ever experienced from a parent, a loved one, and especially a spouse, when you have someone suffering addiction, active addiction, it creates havoc and just really create struggles within your family unit, both emotionally, energetically, and certainly financially. And so we face a lot of those obstacles together. And, I was here during COVID and the world shut down and Costa Rica's borders were closed and business was closed. And then, life reopens and things start to move. And at that time, I had a business partner, and this is more in the business coaching consulting world down here, who unfortunately was not of integrity and showed his truth. Thankfully, it was shown very quickly. But as a result of a really unfortunate business partnership relationship, it caused an additional financial hit. So now we are, a couple years into Costa Rica. We've dealt with journeys and, with rehab. We've had like fertility loss. I had 3 surgeries down here. That was a huge financial impact. I had the impact of this business partner who left a really negative financial situation. And you just kind of reach a point where it's like, man, what? Didn't I already like pay the price of trauma and have to like go through enough already? Like, why? And then you realize, like, okay, I can again choose to respond in one way or another way. And I think through all of that, what I learned first before I even kind of get to like the light again was I had to sit with discomfort. My way of operating was always to make lemonade. There's always a positive. And while I do believe that is true, sometimes there's just certain things that happen that you have to give yourself space to digest, to understand, and to own and accept emotions that you may have never experienced. I had never experienced grief, as an example, until I lost back to back babies. Like, I had never known what that kind of pain, like, I lost a grandparent and that hurt, but that's a different type of grief. And so for me, being able to sit with new emotions, being able to understand, like, okay, yes, I know in my logical brain I will get to the other side, but right now I'm unclear of that path. And being okay with that, that was something that was so uncomfortable because I was always confident. I always knew, and I lost that. And in losing that, I lost a bit of the belief in self. I questioned myself. I doubted myself. It was just that spiral, and it was in a very dark place. I've shared with you, it was bad enough where I sat on a line and called for help. And I said, what can I do to change this? And things were starting to a little bit, but there was a very dramatic day. I will always remember it was August 16th. Ironically, I had chosen to take a corporate job for a few months prior, and they laid everyone off. It was my first day of like new unemployment. And by the way, such a blessing. I was never meant to go back to corporate. So I was going to take my dog to the vet. I had my daughter in the back seat. It was a typical road. For those not listening, we have a lot of kind of off-roading experiences back here, and I had to cross a river. And they always say, like, if you don't know, walk the river. Well, this was a normal river day. It was low tide. It wasn't flowing. People had crossed it. Nothing seemed off. And all of a sudden, I get in the river and I feel my car shift. But it was so fast, I thought it just like I stalled or something. So I hurried up to restart it and put it in 4-wheel. And I started to feel the car tip. One thing about rivers, you're always supposed to drive with the windows open when you got to the river. My windows were not open. Thank God I was able to quickly push the button and they came down. And I just had a moment and I had to get, Mary Paz out of the car, the dog out of the car. And we got very safely to the riverbank. When I stepped out of the car, the water was only to my calf. And I was in a large Toyota Prado. It's like a Land Cruiser. So that felt like, what is going on? I get to the shore and I look back and the car is like fully tilted. And we learn when like the fire truck and the big tractor comes to pull us out that the night before someone had gotten stuck, caused a rut in the river. And when my front tire hit it, the riverbed dropped out. And in that day and in that moment, it was just like nothing could get worse. Like the car was gone. Insurance doesn't protect you from rivers in Costa Rica. I was already in financial ruin. So I was like, what's another, $100,000 car on top of it? Like that's literally what I felt sitting at the riverbank is looking back. I'm like, it's all gone. Everything is done. And then as the days went on, I was like, no, it's not. Like that was the burst that needed to happen to fully break free. And like, I don't know, it was literally like, as crazy as it sounds, it's like, even though the river wasn't raging or surging, it was like that moment in that river, it was scary. It was the final straw, as they say, that broke the camel's back of like pure ruins. And then the blessings began. Like, I realized I never asked for help. I went to trusted loved ones. I was like, I need help emotionally, financially, but I want help in a way that allows me to rise up. Don't like give me a handout, but it just taught me like, wow, sometimes you really have to literally hit the riverbed, break free, tune into the sources around you. And for me, while I feel I'm a pretty vulnerable person, to have to turn to someone and let them know, hey, this is happening. At that time, I probably had negative money in my bank account, food, like work opportunities. That was the rawest version I could ever find myself in and the most vulnerable. But in doing so, it had opened a path that led me to now where I am. I think, what is it, like 18 months later, finally, like really, really on the path of purpose that I intended and believe I'm meant to be on.
That's Stacie. That's an incredible story, and there's something you said there. You said like it was the straw that broke the camel back. That finally, it broke the last. I can't remember your exact expression. You said something like it kind of broke the last hold you had, or it finally kind of broke you free. And I'm like, of what? Like, what was it that you saw that it kind of broke you free from? Because yeah.
I think I was holding on to so much still. Like, no, I can make this relationship work. I can make this business opportunity work. I'll find a way out of this financial piece. And while those are true, the way in which I was going about it was such a place of struggle. I was trying to carry the burden as an individual, not leaning into trusted loved ones. Like, it was myself I think I needed to break free from. Like, I had held on so much. I didn't wanna be as real about the truth about what was happening in our home. It was embarrassing to it. I get emotional a little because it was such a dark time of my life, and I was so afraid to admit it. So to me, that Riverdale was like, well, there's nothing left, so you might as well just be honest. And so for me, it was the freedom of myself and my truth. And in that freedom, I found hope again. I found support. I found nourishment. And it didn't take a lot of people. It took the authenticity of me saying the truth to a couple trusted people to know, like, it's okay. Others go through these moments too. You are supported and it is possible for something different. And so I think, to kind of summarize it, it was literally from myself, my own inability to truly admit, like, I need help and it's okay to need help.
Mm. And I think you said something so important earlier, it's a recurring theme I think we've heard from a number of people, is letting go like that, and when you stop trying to figure it all out and you're willing to let it go, the exhaustion seeps out of your body.
Oh, yes.
You know, the sheer fatigue of maintaining the, and I'm not going to call it a veneer, but you know what I mean. It's that fatigue of maintaining the positivity and and trying to meet your identity wherever it has morphed to. And when you no longer have to skate to that puck, and you can simply sit back and go, I am enough. I don't have to pay attention to this noise. I don't have to pay attention to these thoughts. I can let that narrative go. I can be vulnerable, but I can fall back into just who I am and just being, and then I can operate from that place. I can go and access the love that I know exists. I can go and access the support. I can be as raw about my relationship or my financial situation or my whatever it is. And when you operate, and you use the word, which I was delighted by, like, that magic does happen. Even from when you've literally hit the river bed, you've hit bedrock. It's as low as you can go. The magic starts to flow from that place. And it's amazing how often as human beings, and I've experienced this myself, but as human beings, we have to sometimes go to those bedrock places in order to see what the universe has been pointing at all along. And just letting go of our narrative about how positive we should be, or how stoic we should be, or how we can't talk about certain things because they are embarrassing, or they are, we are ashamed, or we operating from a place of fear. And to let all of that go is like the most exhilarating exhale you can imagine. And then you take one tentative foot and you put it in front of the other, and suddenly you're on a different magical path where things happen.
I feel the need to dive in, and I kind of want to put something to both to Stacie and you, Mark. And I think there's a danger in painting, and I'm not saying, Billows, that you've done this, but it's just more what comes to mind, and it comes to mind from a conversation I had with someone this week, which is that, like, on the other side of this, it's like rainbows and butterflies, and like we hit rock bottom, and then everything after there is magical, and I think there is magic. But I also, the thing I heard, Stacie, in your story was about sitting in the discomfort, and I'm really interested in kind of just drawing that out, because I had a conversation with someone this week and they said, yeah, but that's going to be hard. And I was like, yeah, no one said this is going to be freaking easy. It depends on like what you're looking to kind of unlock for yourself. And so I'm really curious just to explore that a little bit in terms of like, what's the actual realities of like letting go and stepping into the discomfort of, whether it's being vulnerable, the discomfort of like, what's the actual path? What was your path like in terms of I'm delighted that I'm here. And yet, what was the truth of that discomfort? Because I think shining a light on that, it kind of is it's, I don't know, it feels to me that like there's an illusion, like what's really the easy option and what's really hard. There's something there, I think, that I would love to explore, and I'm interested to hear what your perspective would be.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think, especially in this day and age, when we live in a world of social media, it's so easy to think it is just this like, oh, you hit this point and then suddenly it's great. That's not the case. I mean, I think that river incident, as I told you, was almost 2 years ago. When we hit August, it'll be 2 years, and there's still so much work I'm doing in repair. But for me, it was accepting that certain things had to change. Like, I had to give up a really beautiful rental house and move in. Mark's seen, and you might have when you were here on a company trip, like a more traditional local housing option. And, like I went from a really beautiful home into a house that had open windows and a tin roof, and it was basically a one bedroom, and it was beautiful, and it's my husband's family space, and that's even evolved since then. But I had to give up what I thought the day-to-day life would look like. It's okay. Like, the number one thing is that I'm safe and my daughter is safe and that we're in a loving environment. So these pretty walls and this great exterior is nice, but I get to go move into this beautiful existence here because it's where I can afford to be. I will have a roof. I will have food for my child. And like the easy path, frankly, would have been to have left and go back to the US. A lot of my friends were like, why are you not here? You could easily walk into corporate America and you would get probably, I don't know, 200 plus $1,000 salary overnight. That would have been easy. The difficult part was choosing to stay. And frankly, at the time, yes, a little girl was my driving force in that decision. But it was that I had to accept you no longer have a car, and you no, sorry, is not easy without a car. Getting a child across town, we relied again, leaning into help. Like, I had to say, okay, who's passing at this hour? How do I get her here? How do we make sure she's still able to have like childhood, right? The emotional side, like you never want to like your kids to see you as a wreck. I do feel we as parents need to show emotion and teach them that we also struggle. But like, I didn't have the money to pick up therapy or go places like that. But I did have the ability to ask in the community, like, hey, is someone available for a coffee date? Is someone able to go for a beach walk with me? And being able to find like the small pieces that could help begin the repair process. And one of the biggest ones was what led me to where I am today in my business was a friend saying to me like, "Hey, I got this business. It's a wedding planning business and it's not 100% for me, but I'm not sure what to do." And we had this beautiful conversation and I realized like, "Hey, my business coaching background, your strengths, there was really this nice intersection." And so, like, getting some work opportunities again and going back to that network. So, for me, it was, I think help was really the biggest area that showed up in beginning to repair. And I learned to celebrate the small joys differently. Like what used to be exciting, yeah, it was cool when I got my BMW. But it was a lot cooler when I was able to finally have a car again that was only a couple $1,000s here. Like that lit me up more than any fancy car I drove in Chicago. I know I'm not in the perfect house. I don't own my home right now. But you know what? It's very affordable, and I'm surrounded by this beautiful greenery, the monkeys, the birds. We have our own bedrooms again. Like, those are wins that are so joy-based. Like, they create the same reward in me when I achieved a president's club, right? Like, honoring that where you find your newfound victories, your new wins, your new steps, like you have to celebrate them in that journey because it isn't a switch. It isn't an overnight shift. Like I'm still evolving. I'm nowhere where I want to be, but I'm significantly beyond where I was.
And I think what you're pointing to is you have consciously made a choice through the epiphanies that you've had and the observations you've made of yourself to suffer beautifully, and you create the experience of life that you live on a daily basis because of those choices. And so, traveling in South Africa is not easy, but I can honestly tell you that we were dealing with parents with dementia, and we were cleaning out houses with that were rat infested. But it was a beautiful experience because of where we were, what our come from was. And I think that's what you're pointing to so amazingly. And I think for the listener hearing it, it's a very, very powerful lesson or share, because you have this incredible story and you've chosen how you suffer, and you suffer beautifully as a result of those choices.
Yeah, and I think for me, there was a time in which, when the darkness was so strong and I couldn't see that beauty, that place of discomfort was so strong. And I say this a lot with friends and in my business, like, once your discomfort, the cost of discomfort is so great, you're forced to change, right? Because the cost of change outweighs the cost of the discomfort. And that's where I was. And so I do think it's important to acknowledge, like, every moment that was happening, I wasn't always experiencing it fully from a beautiful lens, but I knew in the possibility of what lied beyond that moment. And like, I was very aware of, like, this state of existence when it did get so dark was not the current state that I wanted to remain in. And I had to be the source of change. It's, you learn this through the recovery journey with someone. Like, no one in that space will ever change until they change for themselves, right? And for me, it was the same thing. And I'm still addressing a lot of these moments and doing the work and, always evolving. And I hope that I always will be, right? But yes, like, I didn't wanna lose the joy and the magic around me either. Like, I'm living this existence. I chose this alternative path for a reason, and yet I found myself so far from it, and that was because of where I was mentally, right? I was so far from seeing the beauty that I wanted it back again so deeply, and I do want that. And, like, it's a full circle moment, like, my sister said it to me like, a couple weeks ago after I'd shared of meeting you, and how, like, it's interesting, my journey started one way and went, like, it's up and down, and here we are full circle and ultimately aligned in the way, oddly enough, through a crazy wedding business that has expanded into this full event business, and now sharing in connection with amazing leaders and like-minded people. And she's like, "Wow, I feel like you're exactly where you set out to be. It might have taken the time that it took." And I think that's important. Like, it takes the time that it takes. Like, it's not always on our timeline, but we arrive when we're supposed to. And so I do feel like I'm landing. I still feel like there's, things to work out, but I'm landing right where I'm supposed to be in the journey.
There's a word you used, Stacie, a few minutes ago, and I think it's an underrated position. You use the word stay. You were like, it would have been easy to go back to America. It would be easy. And you're like, I stayed. And I think that's so powerful to hear. It's like, stay the course, like, stay being true to yourself. And it's like, as someone said to me yesterday, we get to choose our hard. Like, life is a contact sport. Like, it doesn't really matter which path you go. Like, life is a contact sport. And it's like, choose your hard. And then what I hear in your whole story, like, from being a very young age, is like, it's the power of staying true to yourself, staying in the moment, staying in the discomfort, because staying with that deeper knowing beyond the, like, intellectual, wow, go back to America, or the, You could do this. It's like, no, like stay. And, I think maybe that for me is probably the thing I'm hearing so strongly in this, because the easy option is to kind of get out of Dodge, but that's a whole different world of hard. And like the power of staying, it can be hard, but what's on offer on the other side of that hard is like what I'm seeing is huge. And we're sat here and we're kind of seeing you, and you said to me at the beginning, you're like, oh, Al, you might just have to ignore the monkey noises in the background. I was like, that might be the coolest thing I've ever heard a guest say coming onto this podcast. But so it'd be easy for people to see this picture and be like, wow, Costa Rica, and it's this. But what I really want, what I hear and what I hope the listeners hearing is, man, staying there's real power in staying. And there's a choice, like choose your hard.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. I feel very seen, so I appreciate that. It's not always easy, right? This shows up a lot with people that are curious about like Costa Rica and probably anywhere that they're looking to move. Is like life is always going to happen to you, right? Like it's not going to change based on a location. And a early leader in my career always said, like, when you make a choice, make sure you're running to something, not from something. And when I've always honored that, and it's always served me, because like for me, I know my inner self is leading my path, and I fought it at times. I don't know that in other times of my life, like the ability to just stay would have been as present for me. And not everyone's going to understand your reasoning or your path, and that's okay. Like, I think it's about understanding you as a person, understanding your why. I've been scared a lot, but I maintain that leading principle of courageous confidence to stay the course. And it's hard, and it's also extremely rewarding, and it's a beautiful life when you walk in that integrity with yourself.
We have a little tradition on this podcast. I'm sure you know because you've listened to it. We ask you to come up with a bumper sticker for life.
I think whether it's the dreams inside of you that are just stirring to small life shifts, like the power of now is so real. And so for me, it always goes back to, and this came years ago from my own coaching experience, like, if not now, when?
Love it.
Love that, Stacie. If not now, when? Gosh, that's a doozy.